Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really going to rethink compassion. Forget the sort of soft, fuzzy notions you might have. Our sources reveal true compassion isn't just about feeling good. It's described as, well, a profound expression of our humanity, a spontaneous, wise movement that helps us truly see, deeply be present, and naturally do what's needed to relieve suffering. So we're on a mission today to expose some common distortions of compassion and, uncover how we can genuinely cultivate this powerful force in our lives.
And that's exactly why this deep dive is so crucial, I think. While compassion is often talked about as the remedy for suffering, especially in, say, demanding environments like the workplace, the truth is, without genuine wisdom as its foundation, it can become merely performative, sentimental, or even surprisingly harmful. This deep dive builds on previous explorations where we've distinguished compassion from mere empathy and also delved into the deep-seated nature of suffering, often termed dukkha in Buddhist traditions. For today, we're going to focus on two main areas. First, understanding some modern distortions of compassion, like idiot compassion and wrathful compassion, new ways. Then we'll pivot to a structured approach for cultivating truly authentic compassion through specific practices.
Okay, so let's jump in and confront a concept you might not have heard of: idiot compassion. One time. This term was coined by the master meditator, teacher, and author Chögyam Trungpa. What he described was a type of misguided kindness that doesn't actually come from true wisdom. Instead, it stems from what he called the three poisons: grasping, aggression, and delusion, which are essentially the fundamental attachments, aversions, and confusions that, cloud our judgment. It's well-intentioned, no doubt, but ultimately it's unhelpful. In fact, it can enable negative behaviors or even cause long-term harm. So without wisdom guiding it, idiot compassion often just masquerades as generosity. It avoids discomfort, both our own and that of others, seeking to soothe rather than serve the truth. Can you give us a clearer picture of what that looks like in practice?
Absolutely. Think of it as a well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful kindness. And we can add another important layer to this with Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist John Welwood's concept of spiritual bypassing, which he introduced back in the mid-1980s. He described it as premature transcendence. It's using spiritual language or practices to avoid the real psychological work, to bypass inner conflict, repressed emotion, or what's often called shadow material. So when we use something like compassion to avoid these deeper issues, we're not truly being compassionate, we're actually being avoidant.
Avoidant, right, not compassionate.
Exactly. True compassion, in contrast, doesn't shy away from discomfort. It's willing to confront pain, to hold tension, and to act with real discernment, even when those actions are difficult. As the renowned Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron emphasizes, idiot compassion often shows up when we avoid conflict, simply to protect our own image of being kind. Common signs you might recognize include, well, avoiding hard conversations to keep the peace, enabling harmful behaviors by not setting limits, or letting others cross boundaries in the name of kindness. While well-meaning, this approach can prolong harmful behavior, lead to emotional burnout for those involved, and damage relationships through unspoken resentment. So it's compassion that enables rather than genuinely helps. That's a powerful distinction. Do you have a concrete example that illustrates this wise compassion in action, perhaps contrasting it with the idiot kind? We do, yeah. Consider this situation from one of our sources.
Mm.
A firm ran a 12-week coaching certification program. Midway through, 4 participants had fallen significantly behind. Now, instead of practicing idiot compassion by hoping they'd somehow catch up, which would have prioritized feelings over the program's integrity, they engaged in wise compassion. They had respectful, direct conversations, outlined the gap in requirements, and offered an early exit with 2 supporting coaching sessions. And all 4 accepted with relief, and the program's integrity remained intact. It was a hard but deeply compassionate call because it prioritized the long-term well-being of everyone and, importantly, the integrity of the program.
That's such a clear example. Wow. And we can see this contrast in everyday scenarios too, can't we? Like if a team member consistently misses deadlines, idiot compassion might be covering for them, doing extra work, saying nothing. But wise compassion would mean expressing your concern clearly and kindly, naming the impact of their actions, and maybe suggesting setting expectations or seeking support together.
Right.
Or if a family member makes repeated hurtful comments, idiot compassion might be brushing it off just to keep the peace.
Yeah, avoid the conflict.
Exactly. But wise compassion, however, would involve naming the behavior respectfully, setting a clear boundary, and explaining what kind of engagement is okay for you. But okay, if idiot compassion is too soft, what happens when a situation demands a firmer hand? Is there an opposite extreme?
Absolutely. And that's where wrathful compassion comes in, the fierce face of love. It might sound paradoxical, maybe even aggressive, but it's crucial to understand its origins in the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism.
Hmm.
There, wrathful deities aren't destructive out of hatred, but out of love, specifically to destroy delusion. This form of compassion arises when harm simply must be interrupted, whether it's a form of injustice, self-deception, or maybe addiction. While it might appear angry, it's actually anger transmuted through wisdom. It is precise, intentional, grounded, and crucially, it is not reactive.
So it's not just uncontrolled anger, but something channeled with intention. That's key.
Exactly, yes. Contemporary psychologist Kristen Neff refers to a similar energy as mama bear, compassion, that fierce protective instinct that compels us to stand up for ourselves or others when harm is present. This form of compassion sets boundaries, speaks difficult truths, and outright refuses to collude with harmful patterns. It doesn't soothe or enable, it liberates. Chogyam Trungpa, in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, even states that genuine compassion may appear cruel or ruthless. He emphasizes prajna, or transcendental wisdom, to discern true needs over superficial wants. Wrathful compassion can be directed outward towards those causing harm, or inward towards the parts of ourselves that self-sabotage. It's truly the sharp edge of love.
The sharp edge of love. I like that. Can you give us an example where this makes a real difference?
Sure. Our sources provide an excellent one with two people, Marcus and Darren. Darren was struggling with alcohol, kind of brushing off Marcus's concern. Marcus held his ground, calmly stating, "You're not fine. I'm not pretending it's normal anymore. I'm not going to watch you unravel and call it loyalty." He offered support, like a ride to a meeting, a call to someone, but refused to maintain the silence that enabled the drinking. It was described as just presence, unmoving.
Wow. Just
Yeah.
presence, unmoving.
Yeah. And this fierce compassion can actually be an antidote to empathic distress or burnout. The key qualities of wise compassion, which incorporate these, let's call them wrathful aspects, include discernment, knowing when help is genuinely helpful versus when it enables harm. Also, truthfulness, clear boundaries, and critically self-compassion, recognizing your own limits and needs.
That makes so much sense. It really broadens our understanding of what compassionate action looks like, showing it's not always about, softness. Which leads us to another common misunderstanding, doesn't it? That compassion always involves outward, visible action. I mean, many contemporary frameworks, especially in leadership or coaching, define compassion by contrasting it with empathy. They often say empathy is sharing feelings, while compassion is the act of showing kindness or taking action to help. But does this strong focus on doing miss something deeper about compassion?
Well, from a Buddhist or non-dual perspective, yes, this is indeed a limited view. True compassion isn't always about doing something externally. It may instead call for being someone internally, being fully present, open, courageous, and willing to stay with suffering without trying to erase or escape it. In fact, the most compassionate acts might actually be inner stillness, silent presence, or even the refusal to act prematurely.
So not acting can be compassionate.
Yes. Our sources emphasize that inner actions, like cultivating right intention, right effort, non-harming renunciation and goodwill, are absolutely not passive. Not at all. They are potent internal movements rooted in mindfulness and ethical clarity. These inner movements shape how we listen, how we speak, when we choose to withhold action, and how we hold space for others without distortion.
So when we talk about wisdom in action, it's not just about intervening directly then.
Precisely. When we describe compassion as wisdom in action, we're not just referring to outward intervention. Not solely. We're talking about a quality of awareness that moves from a deep inner awakening. This kind of action isn't ego-driven, reactive, or performative.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from our own discomfort or a need to be seen as helpful. It arises from the intentional motivation of bodhicitta, the awakened heart that clearly sees the nature and complexity of suffering. In this way, wise compassion transcends the false divide between doing and being. It acts when needed and remains still when action might distort the truth. It's the natural, grounded movement of presence, which may or may not take external form, but is always rooted in deep inner alignment.
That distinction is so powerful. It makes compassion feel much more accessible and internal somehow. So let's shift to the practical side. How do we actually cultivate this nuanced, wise compassion in our own lives? Our sources introduce 3 foundational pillars that create the conditions for this kind of spontaneous, genuine compassion to emerge.
Exactly. The first pillar is mindfulness, the inner path toward compassion. To truly understand the wisdom underpinning compassion, we have to look at mindfulness sati, as it's called in Pali, in its original context. It's rooted in ancient principles like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which include things like right view, right intention, right effort, right action, and right concentration. Anchored in these, mindfulness supports a spacious, egoless awareness. This is the very ground from which both wisdom and compassion naturally arise. People often adopt mindfulness for three, you could say, progressively deepening reasons. First, for focus, just cultivating attention to relieve stress and stabilize the mind-body. Second, for open monitoring, developing intimacy with our mental and emotional patterns. And third, for non-dual awareness, which aims to uproot the causes of suffering and perhaps glimpse liberation.
So it goes way beyond just stress management.
Absolutely. This isn't just about stress management. Recent research from cognitive scientists Ruben Laukonen and Helene Slagter highlighted in a 2024 Vox feature. It actually maps how breathing practices and meditative states genuinely transform consciousness, affirming this depth in cultivating compassion. Stanford's compassion cultivation training also echoes this. The path to compassion begins inward, cultivating presence through mindfulness, then softening the self through loving kindness, and awakening the impulse to care through common humanity.
Okay, so it's about building that foundation of awareness first. What about actively cultivating that compassionate inclination itself? Our sources point to a practice called Mettā as the second pillar. What is that?
Right, so that inner path of mindfulness sets the stage. Metta, or Maitri in Sanskrit, translates as loving kindness or goodwill. It's a profound state of mind characterized by a deep wish for happiness and freedom from suffering for all beings, including ourselves. Thich Nhat Hanh emphasizes metta as the very foundation of the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. It's sort of the bridge between mindfulness and common humanity, cultivating an open, spacious, and deeply connected heart, a loving mind of goodwill that enhances both awareness and understanding.
A loving mind.
Yes. Sharon Salzberg, a renowned meditation teacher, describes it beautifully as the enlivening power of connection, of love, of intimacy. She says it helps us cultivate a life of compassionate, non-harming, allowing us to live with true integrity and stop fragmenting our lives. The practice often involves using traditional phrases like, may I be free from danger, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I live with ease, or directed towards others, may you be free. This helps counteract ill will with intentional goodwill and expands our field of awareness. And you can apply it daily, silently offering, may you be well when irritation rises towards someone, or may I live with ease in moments of self-judgment. It gently softens the solidity of our separate selves.
That's a beautiful way to bring intention into our daily lives. Very practical. And that softening naturally leads us to the third crucial pillar you mentioned, common humanity. How does recognizing our common humanity help us cultivate true compassion?
Well, when we find ourselves impatient, upset, or unsettled, we can pause and reflect on where we might be clinging, maybe over-identifying with an experience, a goal, or some fixed identity. The act of softening, of just letting go a little, creates space. And in that space, we remember that we are truly not alone in our suffering or our striving. We all share a fundamental human experience marked by joy and sorrow, fear and hope, confusion and clarity.
We're all in it together, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Zen Buddhist poet and priest Norman Fisher captures this beautifully. He says, compassion isn't only me benefiting you, it's us together, swirling in and out of each other. My I and your you depend on each other. One can't exist without the other. So recognizing our common humanity shifts us from isolation to connection, and from judgment to understanding. Pema Chodron also reminds us that only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. And mindfulness and metta, those practices we discussed, are key in cultivating this recognition. For instance, just imagining the fears and hopes of others on the freeway as you drive, seeing them not just as cars but as people with complex lives. Thupten Jinpa, the Dalai Lama's principal English translator, outlines a four-step process for compassion which really brings this together. First, an awareness of the true nature of suffering. Second, sensitive concerns related to being moved by that suffering. Third, a genuine wish to see that suffering relieved. And finally, wise responsiveness or a readiness to help relieve that suffering.
Awareness, sensitivity, the wish, and then the readiness to act wisely. And so, bringing it all together, we return to that powerful core definition from our source. Compassion is a full expression of our humanity, a spontaneous movement of wisdom, seeing that awakens deep presence, being, responding naturally to relieve suffering. True compassion, rightly understood, is not soft, it's not sentimental or self-sacrificing, and it is certainly not a performance, a tool, or just a technique.
Precisely. It is a powerful expression of wisdom, spontaneous, active, discerning, and a natural response to suffering that arises from recognizing the truth of our common humanity. It's not bound by mere emotion or morality, but rooted in bodhicitta, that awakened heart-mind that deeply longs for freedom for all beings. So to truly practice compassion is to see clearly, to feel deeply, and to act skillfully. It means cutting through the illusions born of our conditioning, holding suffering without becoming entangled in it, and responding from spaciousness rather than reactivity. So, as you go about your day, maybe consider this. True compassion holds both tenderness and ferocity, one that comforts and confronts, one that sees clearly and acts freely. Compassion is not a performance, it is the awakened heart in motion.